the bison is, without question, the biggest badass in North America.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She hates the word sustainability because to sustain something is to literally keep it the same.
Yeah.
Whereas to regenerate something is to make it better. The word regenerative, it's the Wild West. Anyone can use it in any way they want. There's literally no such thing as a bloodless diet.
So, Matt, welcome to the Year of Plenty podcast. How's it going?
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here. Great to have you guys here on the ranch, and this is awesome.
Yeah, I'm pumped we could actually make it out to your ranch. It's always nice to sit down with people instead of doing it remote,
Yep.
see them in person, see how you're living out here. It's pretty special. Yeah. And we're sitting here, if you're listening right now, we're also recording this on video, and we're sitting in Matt's barn right by the meat freezers.
Yeah.
Surrounded by freezers, which is,
the perfect place
the
for
perfect
us.
place for us. Yeah. Where we feel very at home, I would say.
Super
fitting.
cozy.
Yeah, we had 4 meat freezers, and one sadly died last year, which was a huge scare.
It's a very big tragedy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you never want that to happen. So, Matt, you're a bison rancher, but from what I learned about you now, that's not how you started out. So I figured a good place, to start it for the listeners to meet you too, if they don't know about you already, is just give us kind of the rundown, the story behind North Bridger Bison and really what inspired you to become a bison rancher in Montana, of all places.
Sure. So it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it at 50,000 feet. And then you can follow up with as many questions as you want. But yeah, so I was born and raised in suburban Chicago, not from ranching, farming.
Very different place.
Very different
Yeah.
place. Not from a ranching, farming, agricultural family whatsoever. Just kind of a standard Midwestern upbringing, but have always loved nature as far back as I can remember, my earliest memories. And in high school and college, fell hard for the West and Montana, and then also became a passionate conservationist, and decided to go to law school after college. Took a year off in between, and then went to law school for 2 reasons. One, had dreams of living in a place like Montana, and figured every town needs a lawyer.
Absolutely.
And so it'd be a good, job security,
Yeah.
and job flexibility geographically. And then also had an interest in being an environmental lawyer and, working on behalf of, wildlife and wild places and land and that sort of thing. And after law school, spent 3 years in Chicago. And then Sarah and I in 2008, we got married, quit our jobs, got married, moved to Bozeman. And I was able to get a job doing non-litigation policy work for the Natural Resources Defense Council. So I did that. It was 5 years in Livingston and then 5 years in Bozeman. And I really respect environmental policy work. It's super important, but over time for me, it just became a slog. I got really frustrated by it, and just was really craving to do something entrepreneurial on my own that was land-based, conservation-based, and tangible. Like the lack of tangibility in policy work is what really got to me.
Mm.
Right.
And we had 2 kids along the way. So we had different ideas. I'm a big meat hunter, care a lot about food, where it comes from. And not kidding, like I literally read a article in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle 7 years ago that the National Bison Association had their summer conference in Big Sky, and the bison industry was growing and they were looking for more ranchers. And I shit you not, I was like, man, that sounds so great.
Yeah.
Clearly not for me
Yeah.
as a kid from suburban Chicago, but for somebody, that's going to be awesome. And I went on with my day. And then weeks later, that was still like kicking around my head. And I was like, God, I feel like there might be something there. And then ended up reading this book, Buffalo for the Broken Heart by Dan O'Brien, who's a hero of mine. And he started Wild Idea Buffalo in South Dakota and pioneered the modern day field harvesting of bison, which is just, reversing the process of shipping them to a slaughterhouse and just driving out onto the ranch and whatever pasture they're in that day and killing a bison, as ethically and it's as ethical and humane as it gets.
Yeah, we want to hear about that later for sure.
we can get into that. But that was like an instant light bulb moment of like, man, I didn't know that existed. That's the way to do it. And I know there's people who are going to connect with this because I'd met more and more people that, were like, hey, I read Michael Pollan. I've seen Food Inc. I'm just done with meat. And I don't hunt. But if my neighbor kills an elk and gives me 40 pounds or 20 pounds of it, I'm like in heaven. I'm like, so you're not really done with meat. You're done with like the horrific factory farming of like hogs and stuff that we see. And I get it. That's brutal stuff. And that's when we got serious about it. And, my first step, again, not exaggerating, was typing into Google bison ranching consultant, because I knew enough to know that I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And met this amazing guy, Roland Cruz, still a close friend and a consultant for us, who lives on the other side of the Bridgers. And yeah, one thing led to another, and I went to his holistic management workshop, and then we found this land and just kept, putting one foot in front of the other, and here we are.
That's awesome. Man, and it's got to be scary making that step, like especially, buying all this land and then getting into something like bison, What was that like? Were you hesitant at first? I mean, you said at the beginning you were kind of just, you saw it as an idea but didn't think it was for you. But what really drove you to then really make that final step?
Yeah, no, great. I mean, it was scary. But I'd been craving to do something, like I said, that was tangible, entrepreneurial, conservation-based, land-based on my own for a number of years. And just over time, when you come close on something and you either chicken out or it's a bad idea, you slowly strengthen your backbone to take on risk. And so eventually, the bison ranch idea, it just really seemed like there was something there.
Yeah.
And I had not a lot of work travel, but I had a decent amount of work travel in my old job, and I hate work travel.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I just hate it. And going to the airport on a Sunday, just like, it just killed me.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to do something that was really grounded and centered in the greater Bozeman area.
Mm-hmm.
And,
close to the land.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so, but it's interesting, like, as we put more and more work into this and, put a business plan together and just kept working on it, like, I genuinely didn't think it was going to happen. Like I held it loosely because I felt like there was something someone wasn't telling me. Because as we kept going, I kept saying to Sarah, I'm like, look, we're obviously going to make a whole bunch of mistakes, but like, I feel like we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I just kept thinking, like, God, there must be something someone's not telling us. And it turned out there wasn't. And lastly, I guess, it definitely was a big risk and scary and all that, but we'd put so much into it that truly, like, I think the thing that got us over the edge was that at some point, the risk of not doing it became greater than the risk of doing it. Like we'd put so much into it, I could see it. And I was like, if we chicken out, I'm going to regret this forever. And so we got to go for it. And like, maybe we'll fall on our faces, but at least we tried. And that was really it. It was just like, we just had to go for it.
Yeah. That's super inspiring because, not a lot of people these days are willing, or maybe a lot of people these days would like you dream of doing something like you are, but they're not willing to necessarily take that step. So, hearing that from you, I think is super inspiring. And I'm sure something about the bison though had to really be a motivating factor for you too, though. Like, I'd love to zoom in on the bison itself a little bit. They're such an awesome animal, right?
Oh yeah.
So what about them is like so captivating to you? And why should people even care about bison?
Sure. So yeah, great question. So when those 10 years doing environmental policy work, the big issue I worked on was bison, like particularly wild bison. And I fell head over heels in love with the species. Both the animal itself, like whenever I give ranch tours, I'm like, I explain that the bison is without question the biggest badass in North America.
Yeah, totally.
It's the largest land animal. They're big, they're strong, they're fast, they're agile, they can jump. I talk about how, like, today, in the backcountry of Yellowstone Park, you know, if you could have the biggest grizzly walking by and a mature bison laying down, that bison wouldn't even get up.
Yeah.
It would look at that
Doesn't
grizzly.
care.
It'd be like, I dare you. Like,
I'd
I
love
would,
to be down that level.
I would kill you so fast. And a lot of people, I feel like in Yellowstone, bison don't get enough respect because I just see them kind of like walking around and, you know, laying in mammoth. And part of that's just because they're such a badass that they can do that because they just don't have a whole lot to fear. And then the history of bison, you know, the like we pushed them like right to the brink of extinction
In the US here.
Yeah. In North America.
Yeah.
And there was a time in the late 1800s where we thought they were going to go extinct, and the U.S. government sent out William Hornaday from the Smithsonian to kill a few bison in Montana, because that's where there were still some wild bison left, to bring back to the Smithsonian so we could, because they were like, this species is going extinct. We need to be able to show future generations that this animal once was here. So go kill a few before they're totally gone.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's crazy. So the history of the animal, the whole thing, like Ken Burns just did an amazing 4-part documentary last fall on bison that everyone should watch.
Oh, we'll have to watch.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
For real nerds, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
4 parts.
It's really good. It's heavy, you know. It's the history of bison is heavy, just with bison and Native Americans and North America and all these other species. It's just, you know.
I mean, they've had to have been such an important food source for humans throughout history, you know, like for ages.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so yeah, I had fallen in love with the species and the history and the story and the, you know, their recovery. And so when we got going down this path, it was just clear for us that we were going to do bison. And there were also some things that from a ranching standpoint that really appealed to me. Like bison they're very self-sufficient. They've been on this landscape for tens of thousands of years. They handle, you know, when it's 40 below in the winter, they're fine.
Yeah.
When it's 95 in the summer, they're fine. You know, their historic range went from northern Canada down into Mexico and basically coast to coast.
It's so crazy.
So you think about all of those different environments, winter and summer, they're an incredibly hardy, adaptable species. And, you know, and we haven't messed with them. So they, you know, they breed on their own, they calve on their own, they defend themselves against carnivores really, really well. So there's just a lot that appealed to us.
Yeah.
Has there been any kind of crossbreeding with cattle and bison?
There was, yes, there was some, you know, roughly 100 years ago, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
But there are, you know, a small amount of cattle genes in bison in North America, and it's now like very frowned upon. But apparently there's still a handful of folks that do it. Yeah. But it's definitely not. It's not like a popular thing.
Yeah.
And the bison world, it's very looked down. Like it, yeah, you want to keep them separate.
How do you go about sourcing the first couple bison for your ranch?
Yeah, you know, working with Roland, there are multiple bison ranches in Montana, and so, you know, his advice and others, you know, when you're starting a ranch like this is a very expensive, capital intensive endeavor, and there's places to save money and places to spend money, and getting good animals is a place to spend money, and not crazy, but, you know, because you can go bonkers with like getting bulls from Ted Turner and all this stuff. So not like super crazy, but just make sure you get like, you know,
good genes,
good stock,
good animals. And really the most important thing was getting bison from a source herd that was kind of as close to your ranch as possible, so that those animals are, you know, used to this landscape, this climate, these grasses, these plants, etc. So it was like, you know, I always kind of joke, but like if there was a bison sale on bison in, you know, Tennessee, like bad idea, you know?
Yeah.
You don't want to get bison, and vice versa. People from Tennessee would not want to get bison from Montana. So there are these two really great bison ranches, Deep Creek and Diamond 4D, along the Rocky Mountain front in Montana, near Shoto. And that's where we have gotten all of our bison.
Yeah.
Yeah. So outstanding animals, great genetics, and we're thrilled.
Yeah. It's so special that we still have the bison on the landscape here, and it's awesome that there's people like you who are like, there for them and really helping them thrive. I think, even though you are like harvesting them and you're on your land, but it is really special. Like me being from Germany, I know they used to have a wild bison too. That was called Wiesent, the German name, and like if you ask someone in Germany now, they would have no idea that they once had this awesome animal on their landscape. Because it's like, I think the last one lived like only maybe 100, 150 years ago. I might be wrong in that. Not too long, but it didn't take long for people to just totally forget, about that. So it is cool that there's still people like you out there doing it. And, to continue that lineage. Because we did almost hunt them to extinction, and that would have been a big bummer. So with that being said, like what role do you believe bison ranching can play in like the broader movement toward a more sustainable and resilient food system? Like that's something we're trying to really help figure out with the podcast here, is like, how do we get to a more sustainable but also resilient food system, and that makes people resilient again? And how do you think bison plays into that, if at all?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think, I think bison can play in building a resilient, strong food system. That's the question.
Yeah, like sustainable, resilient food system. Like we're harvesting them year after year, and also just making the landscape more resilient.
I think that there's a great saying in regenerative agriculture, which is it's not the cow, it's the how.
Yeah,
where it's not the animal, it's the management of the animal. And so, we can build an amazing, sustainable, resilient food system with cattle, chicken, goats, lambs, etc. Like you look at all of our neighbors' ranches, and they're absolutely beautiful ranches that have been in their families for generations, amazing ranchers. So it just goes back to it's not the cow, it's the how. But I think where bison can add value is that many people are captivated by bison.
Yeah.
They're literally, as of I think 2016, I think that was the year, they're the United States national mammal.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
We had, the bald eagle, but we did not have a national mammal. And there was a big coalition of people that worked, and sure enough, now bison is the national mammal. And I believe it's the first Saturday in November is like National Bison Day. It's bison is such a iconic species in North America. And, we almost pushed it to the brink of extinction. And there are, a tiny amount of bison. They estimate there used to be 30 to 60 million bison in North America. And now they think there's around 500,000.
Wow.
And so, like the National Bison Association, they have a saying, eat bison to restore bison.
Yeah.
So it's like the more bison ranches that are out there, that means there's more animals out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I think that I'm really passionate about ranching. I think it's the most effective way to achieve the goals of regenerative agriculture and produce really healthy, nutrient-dense food in sync with nature that provides tons of wildlife habitat and bird habitat and waterfowl habitat and pollinator habitat. And so whether it's bison here or Black Angus cattle across the road, I think they're both awesome. And I just think, for bison, some people are like I said, just are captivated by the species and like the way they taste. So it just offers something for folks out there. And you're also helping restore the species.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And it seems like, though, too, that bison play a unique role on the landscape and have throughout history, right? In terms of, being part of the carbon cycle, being part of building topsoil and whatnot. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, so go back thousands of years, or just go back 1,000 years. The whole world, but evolved with millions and millions and millions of grazing animals. But we'll, zero in on Montana, and you had huge herds of bison, elk, deer, pronghorn, a lot of carnivores. And these big herds of animals would move around, and they'd come into a place like the Shields Valley, and they would have a huge, have an short duration, high intensity impact. They'd come in, they'd graze, trample, pee, poop, wallow, and then leave. Long recovery. And, over millennia, built, like the Great Plains had these amazing, deep, very vibrant, fertile soils.
Yeah.
That we have very quickly, unfortunately, decimated.
Exactly.
Across, through plowing and tilling and, monoculture farming. And so that just kind of, removing animals from the land is unnatural. The land evolved with animals, and from a ranched environment, whether it's cattle or bison, it's not the cow, it's the how. It comes back to the management of the animal. So we have our ranch cross-fenced into almost 20 different pastures, and we run it as one herd year round. So whatever pasture the bison are in, every other pasture is being rested. They would graze, poop, and then trample, which is just, knocking down a bunch of plants, and they're just building up organic matter over and over and over.
And as far as I understand it, that also basically motivates the plants to grow more.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard the analogy. It's like lifting weights.
Yeah.
You lift weights to get strong and build muscle.
Go to the gym of bison.
Yeah.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, you know?
And so when an animal comes along and, is grazing a plant, it makes that plant stronger. And, just through photosynthesis, plants are sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, storing it in the soil. And then there's this huge emphasis on soil health now because it all starts in the soil. And, they describe it as like the soils, like there's this black market down there between plants and roots and fungi, and they're all trading, I'll give you some carbon and you got some nitrogen and they've got some phosphorus, and they're trading all this stuff. And so it all starts in the soil. And then the more carbon, obviously from a climate change standpoint, sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it in the ground is a wonderful thing. But it also, the more carbon that's in your soil, the more water your soil is able to retain.
Right.
I think it's like if you increase your soil carbon amount by 1% on an acre, that acre can hold an additional 20,000 gallons of water,
which is huge.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And, you see this catastrophic flooding all over the place. Obviously it would be flood mitigation. And then out here in a dry climate where we in the summer are dying for rain, there's a joke that if it rains and a neighbor says, "How much rain did you get?" You want to be able to say all of it.
Yeah.
None of it left.
There's no runoff.
Because
absolutely none.
Water's leaving, soil's leaving with it, erosion. You don't want to be exporting your soil.
Right. You get runoff that goes into streams. Now all the fish are infected with, all sorts of chemicals in the industrial sense.
Yeah. The reality is back to the Great Plains, and I'm trying to, I think it's the Land Institute, like West Jackson and somewhere in Kansas, but they're doing really cool work. And they've got some pictures of some of these old, or some of these native perennial plants in the Great Plains with root systems that were I want to say 12 feet deep. There's a famous picture of a guy standing and they've got a plant and the roots are way above his head.
Yep.
So that's what used to be there. And years and years and years of plowing and tilling, we have exported. Nicole Masters, the great soil scientist, talks about, we export, the United States exports billions of tons of topsoil every year. And at one point, the UN, there was a UN paper that came out and said they think we had 60 years of farming like this left. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but the bottom line is you don't have to be a scientist or a mathematician or a geologist to realize if this is rock and I'm tapping a table and you've got 6 feet of soil above it, and every year you lose a little bit, at some point when it's gone, you can't grow soybeans out of the rock.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And to bring it back, bison played a huge factor in building that.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Through grazing, trampling, pooing, peeing, stimulating plant growth, and then just doing it again and
Yeah.
doing it again and just
Yeah.
building that. Like, so for here on our ranch, we're building topsoil, we're building organic matter, we're sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, we're doing all these things. And then bison also, the couple of unique things that they do is they shed their winter coats each spring. And so birds and small mammals, you know, have used their hair for a long, long
Really?
time. Yeah. And so like, it's really cool. In the spring here, you'll see sometimes like big chunks of bison hair in the sagebrush. And they've found that where bison are present, songbirds have a higher nesting success rate
Wow.
because they line their nest with the bison hair. And then they also wallow. So they'll like aggressively roll in the same spots over and over. And then they create these little bare patches of ground, and they can become seasonal micro wetlands. And then the edges of that, where it transitions from bare ground back to grass, there's some interesting plants that grow there. And I've just talked to scientists recently that are like really interested in what are the plants that, again, over millennia, when there were 45 million bison, let's say, and bison wallows all over the Great Plains, like what were the plants that adapted to the edge of a bison wallow? And then what are the bees and other pollinators that adapted to those plants?
Yeah.
So it's like you can just geek out, you know, just go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And it's
Into
like,
the wallow.
yeah, well said. But I just literally said it today to someone. I'm like, my favorite thing about all of this that we're doing here is like, you're just endlessly learning.
Yeah.
Like I'll be learning till the day I die.
Mhm.
We were earlier, you know, we were talking about foraging and plant identification, and I just love it. You just,
I always say on a podcast, once you go into like, once you take, or like, once you really dive into your food and try to understand it and try to make it a big part of your life, there's so many rabbit holes, you'll never get bored again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You'll
You know?
never be bored.
Like, be it foraging, be it hunting, be it ranching,
Mhm.
gardening, like there's just a lifelong worth of learning there.
Mhm.
And then get together with people that know what they're doing, and then you can kind of live through them. You know, you share some of your info,
Totally.
they share it with you. Like, that's what it's all about, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just when we were talking before we were recording about what you guys have done this summer and last winter with foraging, I was like, tell me more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
I would love to.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the different fields that you have set up, can you go over kind of what your rotation process is with the bison? You know, how often are they in one field? How long do they stay there? How do you know when it's time to go?
Before we kind of like get into that, maybe just on a grander scale, like you mentioned regenerative agriculture a few times. Some listeners, you know, I think most Year of Plenty podcast listeners have heard the term, know what it is, but maybe you can just give us the bird's eye view of what regenerative agriculture is and how you're kind of trying to achieve it here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going
Sure.
into kind of what Lindy said.
No, great. Yeah. So, you know, great question, because regenerative, it's kind of wild to think about, but 7 years ago, regenerative agriculture was just not a household term.
Yeah.
And now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's getting greenwashed like crazy.
Yeah. Okay. That's, yeah.
And it's not a regulated term. So, I mean, anything can be regenerative. Like I joke that like tires from Walmart
right.
are regenerative. Everything's
I
regenerative.
was going to ask you that because I see it now with more of these big food companies that, you know, they're almost co-opting the term.
100%.
Using it for their marketing, kind of like how grass-fed was the big thing, and now it's like going to regenerative.
It's the word regenerative. It's the Wild West. Anyone can use it in any way they want. So the consumer has to like do their homework and figure out what's real and what's BS.
Right.
But broadly speaking, regenerative agriculture is, I think people can define it differently, but for me, it's very simple. It's farming or ranching to produce food in a way that makes the landscape better.
Mm.
And so, again, Nicole Masters, I mentioned earlier, she has a great line, which is she hates the word sustainability because to sustain something is to literally keep it the same.
Yeah.
Whereas to regenerate something is to make it better.
Right.
Good point. Yeah.
Or continually, to improve it continually.
And there's various principles that are part of regenerative agriculture. There's a huge emphasis on soil health because that's where everything starts. So you're really focused on soil health. So that's, you know, moving away from herbicides, fungicides, pesticides that kill the soil. It's
Yeah.
great.
The microbes.
One of the kings of regenerative agriculture is this great guy Will Harris in Bluffton, Georgia, White Oak Pastures, and he has this line where it's got this thick Southern accent, and he says, herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, all various forms of homicide. And so moving away from those sorts of things and just, really focusing on soil health, and it's ultimately in your own long-term interest to have healthy soil. Mm-hmm. And then one of the principles of regenerative agriculture is using animals, incorporating animals into your program, because that's where your fertilizer is going to come from. But broadly speaking, it's, farming or ranching, producing food in a way that makes the land better.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not like a point in time. It's a long process. And they always talk about, like, context is so important. Like, where's your farm or ranch located? What's the history there? Where's your starting point? So, some people are farther along, some people are farther back. It just kind of depends on where you are in the process and how you're doing it to try to make it better.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then going into Lindy's question.
Lindy's question about how. So we wear on our sleeve that we're like I said earlier, I'm not from a farming ranching family. I didn't study ag in college. We started this from scratch 6 years ago. So we're still learning. I know we will. We'll always be learning. And so with what our rotational grazing program or adaptive multi-paddock grazing that we're doing now is we're focusing on that each pasture only gets grazed once during the growing season.
Gotcha.
And so, because like during resting a pasture in January and February, that doesn't count.
Yep.
Because everything's dormant.
Yep.
So why do you have to rest them?
It's out here where we have a dry, rest is important everywhere, but areas back east where you have a lot more rainfall, rain's just like this magical thing that makes everything better. And so you can have shorter rest, things will recover faster if you have a lot of rain or irrigation. But the rest just goes back to, the way my understanding is the way the landscape evolved with animals that, high intensity, short duration, long recovery. So, if you take a plant and it's just grazed or clipped over and over and over and over and over, eventually it's just going to die.
Yeah. That's not regenerative.
Yeah.
Right?
It has to, rebuild its, it has to recover, rebuild its store of whatever it has in its roots and grow roots.
Well, it needs the leaves too to photosynthesize.
All of it. It has to recover from that grazing event.
Yep.
Right.
And so we have found with our management style, which is we pull the bison. We pull the bison. We don't push them, which I can talk about, and we try to run like a zero stress operation. That it's easier for us to just let the bison go into a pasture, graze it, trample it, kind of hammer it, and then move them out. And then for the rest of the growing season, that pasture is not touched and it can fully recover. And then there's pastures in front that haven't been grazed yet, and they're just, it's money in the bank. They're just growing and growing and growing, and the roots are getting deeper. So that's what we do. And as far as how long for each pasture, it depends on the size of the pasture and the time of year.
Yep.
So earlier in the year, you've got less grass on the landscape. They'll be in there for a shorter amount of time. And then obviously if it's a smaller pasture, they won't be in there very long. And now this time of year, we're, kind of past the growing season, kind of transitioning into the dormant season. And so longer graze periods.
Right. Are you doing any supplemental feed during the dormant season?
Or in the winter?
Yeah. So we feed hay during the winter. And the bison, they seem to always be nibbling and grazing on stuff here and there.
Down.
You'd think that, like you were saying earlier, they're more resilient. They're used to this landscape from, way back when. So you'd think they figure something out, even if they're in captivity.
For sure. For us, it's, we don't have 100,000 acre ranch.
Right,
So
yeah.
we got to deal with the amount of land that we have.
Got it.
So part of it is just, but yeah, bison are built for winter grazing. I mean, they have those huge heads and necks and shoulders that are, built literally to be snowplows.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh yeah. You can Google it and watch
Really?
it, or just go
It's really cool.
or even better, just drive into
Wow.
Yellowstone National Park in the winter.
I've never heard of that.
Oh yeah. You'll see them. There'll be a thing of snow and they'll just slowly
Yeah.
move their head back
Like
and
a
forth,
battering ram.
and they just
That's
move
cool.
the snow back and forth. I've seen it out here when we get, when we're still grazing, we haven't transitioned to feeding hay yet, and we get a big snowfall, and they're just out there and they just go boom, boom, get the grass. And apparently, like in places like Yellowstone, the pronghorn will come in behind them, like other species, because the bison are the snowplow.
Right.
But for us, yeah, the hay is making up their diet in the winter. And so part of it's that we just don't, we'd love to get to a year-round grazing program. We don't have the land base for it. Because with the size of our herd, we think we've hit the sweet spot because I should back up. We were trying to figure out like what's the sweet spot for both the ranch and the business. Like if we had 3 bison, we wouldn't have to feed hay,
Right.
but we'd go bankrupt tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if we had 5,000 bison, our grazing season would be like 2 days long,
Yeah.
and we'd go bankrupt tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so
The challenge.
yeah, so we think like 150 animals is the right number. And then also, because we're ultimately a meat operation, like 100% of our animals are sold direct to consumer. And then
Right.
I field harvest each one on the ranch. That's all we do. And I field harvest year round. So we also want to be feeding hay in the winter because we want to make sure if I'm field harvesting an animal in February or March, it's got beautiful fat coverage and is going to be great eating.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. No, that's awesome. So mostly the regenerative part comes in through the grazing, the effective regenerative grazing, the, what do you call it? The adaptive multi-paddock grazing, right? I think that's the right term.
Yep.
If I'm getting it right. And but that's not what a lot of ranchers have done throughout the years, as far as I understand it, right? Like, why don't they do that with cattle? Why haven't people been doing that? Is there a downside to grazing that way at all?
I mean, a lot of people are doing it now all over the country.
Yeah.
And I would say the cattle people or some cattle ranchers are the ones doing some of the most progressive stuff with moving their cows like twice a day.
Yeah.
Like really, really intense mob grazing that they talk about. But it is more labor intensive.
Okay.
You're gonna have to and more upfront cost. You got to build more fence, and then if you had a big ranch and you had giant pastures, you can move animals in there and leave them for 3 months versus moving them on a weekly basis. It's
Right.
very different.
Very different
Yep.
in
Yeah.
terms of labor intensive. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and cost and maintenance of fences is astronomical, or it can be at least.
Yeah, I mean, we use high tensile fencing, and we found that putting it in is super. I mean, we contracted that out and worked with someone, but it's expensive.
Yep.
But they hold up really well. It's not the
Mm.
maintenance is actually not that bad.
Yeah,
it's just
okay.
it's more labor.
Yeah, we have some friends down in eastern Montana, and the elk take their fence out almost every year.
Yeah, no, that's a huge. We're fortunate we don't have that, thank God. But that's a huge. If you've got, that's a huge deal.
It's almost every year they're begging people like, please come either help us or take care of this.
No, that's an enormous deal.
Yep,
for
very expensive
for a lot of people in Montana for sure. Huge deal.
Yeah, which is why a lot of ranchers want the elk to be hunted. Just for people who often don't see why people don't want elk on the landscape or something. There's definitely a lot of damage that wildlife can do too, as much as we love them, right?
Yeah,
it's like always a weird, like, double-edged sword.
No, it's exactly. It's like everything in life. It's not black and white.
Yeah.
It's gray. It's nuanced. Like we all love ranches because they provide all of this wonderful open space, all of this wildlife habitat, bird habitat, all the stuff I talked about. But if a rancher puts up literally, $100,000 worth of hay
Yeah.
and 300 elk get in and ruin it all
Yeah.
Yeah.
or eat it all and destroy it,
Yeah,
like
that's
that now it's going to be harder for that rancher to stay in business
Yeah.
and stay a ranch. And if the rancher sells, and particularly anywhere close to Bozeman, and then it becomes a housing development,
Mm-hmm.
like there's just lots of different, it's just nuanced.
yeah,
You
super
know?
nuanced.
It's pretty hard to get elk fencing insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, the fencing and then, and the hay,
Yeah.
those are real,
Mhm.
it's just trying to find, it's, I guess, the hot word is coexistence. We're all
Yeah.
trying to find, how do we coexist on working landscapes with elk and carnivores and people trying to make a living and hunters, and I'm a passionate hunter, and just how does it all work?
Yeah.
And it requires, some compromise and creative solutions, and
Yeah.
it's not can't be winner take all.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, I want to move on to the field harvest and how much you harvest a bison in a sec here, but just to close off kind of the regenerative question, I guess,
Sure.
is there anything you've done or are planning to do to kind of measure your success on the land?
Yeah. So I'll answer that, but earlier saying the grazing is the main thing we do that's regenerative. I'd say the other things that we do, we don't use any chemicals here, so no herbicide, pesticide, anything like that. And then, we're ultimately managing for biodiversity here.
Yeah.
And we do it for two reasons. One, we love biodiversity, and as we all know, we're in the middle of an extinction crisis.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Lots of species.
it's crazy. So we manage for biodiversity because we love biodiversity, full stop. And then selfishly, the science is clear that the more biodiverse our ranch is, the more resilient the ranch
Mhm.
is, the healthier the bison are, the more resilient they are.
Yep.
And the healthier the people that eat their meat are.
Yep.
And so, like, the more species of grasses and wildflowers and forbs and all of that, the better.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you should have Fred Provenza on the podcast.
Okay.
It's this amazing scientist from Utah State that retired to Ennis, Montana. Well, he's not really retired. He's constantly speaking and going to conferences, and he just wrote this great book. But his research has shown very clearly that, like, the more diversity you have on the landscape, the better it is for your ranch and your animals.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd love to talk to him. We've had Stefan van Vliet on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a pal.
He's awesome. I love him.
They're those two are tight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's for someone listening right now. Listen to that episode. We get deep into how cattle grazing and biodiverse pastures can really increase the nutrients
Yeah.
and the meat and the fat. And
Mhm.
I wanted to do an elk study with him
Huh.
forever. Like I was trying to get like 20 hunters to donate some elk meat,
Yeah.
but it got really complicated because he needs like the same spot on the animal, and organizing that between all the hunters, and then also he needed the county. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get anyone to
that's gonna
tell
be
me
tricky.
that.
Yeah. So where exactly
But
did
I
you
really
get this
wanted to
from
know.
here?
Like, he was super down.
Oh,
We're gonna
yeah.
do this study on like, is elk like what's up with elk meat in terms of phytonutrients and whatnot. So
We need
maybe
to just get
it's
some
my
of the,
dream one day to figure that
that's-
out how to do
Yeah.
it with
He
him.
just emailed me literally out of the blue like 2 weeks ago, because they've got a grant to do more of exactly the work you're talking about, and so he wants to come up here to our place. And
But tell me when he does.
I
I'd
will.
love to meet him in
yeah,
person.
yeah,
We've texted in the past a lot. And
yeah.
stuff, and
He's
Yeah.
I've seen him speak and talk to him on the phone. His work is
Love it.
just
Yeah.
so fascinating.
super
Mhm.
powerful.
Yep.
Yeah. Really
And-
important.
And it just makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like if an animal is grazing dozens of species versus
Yeah.
one species of grass, like the animal grazing dozens of species is just going to have more nutrients.
Yeah.
It just, yeah.
Makes sense. And that's why we love to eat wild game and, get more bison into our diet too in the future. So yeah, it's really good stuff.
Mhm.
So, but to measure going back to
Oh,
measuring the success of the regenerative.
So we're working with two different consultants who have multiple transects set up on the ranch where they've done a bunch of baseline testing, and then they're monitoring various data points like the amount of bare ground, plant diversity,
Mhm.
compaction of the soil, which is related to how much water the soil can retain in an hour, or how fast it can absorb an inch of rain. And then some soil sampling, carbon sampling in the soil. And so we are actively monitoring various spots on the ranch so that we can see, like, are we doing this right? Are we regenerating, or are we not? Do we have to make changes?
Right.
And so it's still super early for us, but we're, we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
It's going to be very cool in the next 10, 20 years to see the results of those studies and how much things improve, if they improve.
Sure. Yeah.
Assuming they do, but hopeful.
Yep.
And you guys have already been like certified for birds, right?
Yep.
I read something about the bird certification.
Yeah. Last year we became the first Audubon certified bird-friendly bison ranch in Montana, which is awesome. We're bird nerds, and so they have a habitat management plan for us, and they come out each spring to do a bird survey. So, and it's one morning, and so they've been out two mornings in June 2023, June of this year, and have documented over 50 birds so far. And there's a bunch that I know that I've seen that are not on their list, so we know it's well north of that.
Yeah, that's something we actually, I think it was during the talk that you gave too over at Tinworks. And like, something that really resonated with me there that one of the ladies brought up is like the value of ranchers as like just like observers and like data points. Like you're a scientist in a way, because you're like, you see your land every day. Many ranchers take note of what's on their land.
Oh yeah.
It's like this gold mine of data for scientists, you know?
It's like another hero of mine, my neighbor Lyle, who's in his 80s and has been here more or less his whole life. I can't imagine what changes he's seen and just things he knows innately from being on this landscape for decades.
Yeah, that's special.
Yeah, farmers are our Carhartt wearing scientists. No white lab coats here.
Love it.
Yeah.
Lindy, you want to get us into the next part?
Yes, I do, but I just lost my spot on my question list.
Well, we're really curious about the bison harvest.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe we start out with talking about if you even harvest year round. You know, is that something you do? Or does that work?
Yeah. So we field harvest year round, and I just field harvested a bison on Friday, and I'll be field harvesting bison on Thursday this week. And I guess I can just tell you what it looks like. So
yeah, maybe there's a story, maybe your first time or
any impactful stories that you have. Sure.
Well, first I'll kind of just set this for the listener so they know what it entails.
Right.
But basically, excuse me. As I said, we run our ranch. It's one herd year round, moves around together. So like this, let's just say last Friday, for example, I drive out wherever the bison are that day, and I talked about this in that Tinworks talk of like the trust factor.
Right.
And so something that somebody asked me a year ago, they said, do you think you've built trust with your animals? And it's something I just hadn't thought about. And when I paused to think on it, I was like, yeah, like a shit ton of trust.
Yeah.
And I've it's something that's been in my mind a lot ever since that person asked me that question. And it's, I just think about it in the sense that like, if I didn't build trust, if I didn't have trust with our animals, like our business model would collapse overnight.
Yeah.
So like when I drive out last Friday morning, if the herd is like, oh my God, death truck, Matt,
run.
Like I'm
death truck.
Field harvesting's over.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
You're right.
They're stressed and they're panicked.
They're just gone because they're fast and strong and smart. Like it's,
They'd probably even break through your fence potentially.
Yeah.
Or you.
Yeah. And so, 99.99999% of the time that I interact with them, nothing happens, right? Often good things, like I move them to a pasture of fresh grass, I roll out hay, or it's just me standing there taking pictures or whatever. So I've built trust with them. So I drive out there last Friday, the herd, and I always joke, I'm like, oh, the bison are like, idiot with the beard's here again in his white truck. And they just, and then I know who the meat animals are. And it's the first one that provides a perfect headshot from like 10 yards. I stay in the truck. They tolerate you much better in the truck than on foot. And the arm of the rear view mirror gives you a good rifle rest. And then it's a headshot, boom, animal drops, lift it up with a bale bed, bleed it, take it to a different pasture, eviscerate it or gut it, field dress it, and then take it to the Amsterdam meat shop where they skin it, dry age it. And
So it's just you doing this by yourself.
Yes. Most of them, like Friday was just me by myself.
Yeah.
Every now and then someone will, there's a lot of interest in it, which is really cool. So every now and then there'll be someone, riding shotgun to like experience it and see it. And then in the summer, we're moving away from this, but in the summer we've had this mobile processing truck. And so I'll drive that out and set it up. And then two of my buddies at the butcher shop come out and I'll field harvest 4 over the course of the day. And then they'll do everything there. And at the end of the day, you've got 8 sides of bison hanging from the rail in the cooler. And then I drive it down to the butcher a couple days later. But for this year, we've only used it twice. And so the rest of the year, and for sure all fall, all winter, it's usually me by myself. I love doing it by myself. It's just kind of, kind of meditative state you kind of fall into, take it very seriously. And, so it's typically me by myself.
That just seems so crazy, like having to gut the animal by yourself and all that.
Yeah.
It's a giant animal.
Right.
And you said you take them to a different field. Are you leaving the gut pile in that field for coyotes, or are you disposing of it? Or
No. So so I take it to a different pasture, and I'll actually like pick spots because bare ground is our enemy. We want the land, we want the ground covered in plants. We don't like bare ground. And so if I see a spot that, is just looking rough, like a lot of bare ground and weak plants, I'll gut it right there so that all that blood and the guts and and then the scavengers come, the coyotes, ravens, magpies, bald eagles, golden eagles, and all that's left, a couple days later is the grass that was in its stomach. And a bison eats about 3% of their grass a day. About 3% of their body weight a day in grass. So and their 1,000-pound animal works out to around 30 pounds of grass. So there's a couple hundred gut piles spread around the ranch, and you can sometimes or often see right around the edges will be like darker green, thicker grass.
Right.
Yeah. It's cool.
That's a great way to do it. Are you keeping the heart, liver, any organs from them?
So, I lift it up with the bale bed, bleed it, and then take it to a different pasture, cut its head off, save the tongue and the cheeks, and then open up the chest side of it, save the heart. And then when I take everything out, save the kidneys, liver, hanging tender, and now am saving the fat.
Great.
And working with someone that's doing tallow.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Is that fat really dark orange, almost like yellow?
Great question. It depends on the age of the animal.
Okay.
So a younger animal will be yellowish, yellow, and then an old animal will be almost orange. Wow. Like so dark.
And as far as I understand, it's the beta carotene.
That's my
plant,
understanding
right?
as well. They're just absorbing that through the grass over the course of their life.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh man. That makes some good tell. Let me know when you got that.
Yeah.
In stock. And although, by the way, you mentioned your white truck. I think it was last year at some point. I saw a white truck drive past me on the highway with a bison on the back without a head.
He was all excited.
And I took a picture, and I'm like, only in Montana, and I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
It was you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Occasionally, someone says, I saw you today.
Yeah.
Dead bison, no head, white truck.
Yeah. That's
Wonder
funny.
who it could be.
Yeah.
So to bring it back to the field harvest, though, you mentioned there's this trust you have to build with these animals, and do you have a story maybe that you could share that really kind of explains that the need for trust and also the the process to someone who might struggle with the idea of for us we're hunters, so we're
Sure.
like used to that, but
Mhm.
if someone's listening who might struggle with the idea of you going out and shooting at animal, because most people are so removed
Totally.
from that. Like you go to the store, all you see is steak.
In plastic wrap.
You never think, many people never have to think about the animal when they're at the grocery store buying it there,
Totally. And I think that we're so many places to start, but where I like to start is particularly for that person who I grew up in suburban Chicago. Like I was once that person.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So if someone listening is that person, like you shouldn't feel bad, right? Like people,
Right.
you're learning and different people's experiences, and hell, I mean, most people, aren't geeking out on it like the three of us. Right?
Yeah.
Like they're trying to like
Exactly.
get food on the table, pay rent, like
Yep.
they're just doing the best they can.
Yep.
And they got big things to worry about. But it's like always like to start at the place. There's this great regenerative agriculture nutritionist, Diana Rogers, who wrote a book called Sacred Cow and has a movie. She talks a lot about this stuff. It's kind of her lane, her big thing. And she says, like, you got to start from the place that there's literally no such thing as a bloodless diet.
Mhm.
Like if you eat food, you're killing stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you eat a vegan diet, you're killing things.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And someone would be like, what? That no. And it's like, well, okay, let's unpack that. It's like the monoculture wheat, corn, soy of the Midwest is the backbone of that, plant-based food world.
Unless you're growing it yourself,
Unless you're growing it yourself,
which is rare.
rare
And difficult.
and difficult and probably seasonal. And is it feeding you year round? But, those places, they're, my understanding, I haven't like walked through a traditional conventional monoculture soybean field, but they're like ecological deserts.
Yeah.
They're
I
quiet. Have you?
corn like I
Yeah.
used when I lived in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just you don't hear birds. Like the soil is dead. It's chemical agriculture, so the soil's dead. The rivers are dead, or they're being poisoned by all the stuff that's sprayed on the soil and the plants. Bunch of wildlife habitat's been destroyed, bird habitat, and then when it's time to harvest, like the combine's not dodging the any critter that's running around.
Yeah, I have personal experience with that actually in Germany it is often like my dad leases land for hunting in Germany, and traditionally the farmers would always call them before they go through with the combines, so we would go as a kid, I would go with my dad and other hunters, look for fawns in the field. As time has gone on, it's kind of, that tradition has gone away, so they're just going in and, I remember my dad got a call from a farmer like, come out here, I drove over one, it's still alive.
Oh, wow.
And he had to come and take it out of its misery, no more legs, nothing,
Right.
He just kind of tossed it, finished his job, and it was laying there the entire time, dying.
Wow.
So, yeah, just to,
Yeah.
like, I've had some personal experience with that. And
So yeah, and then transportation. I mean, all the different things, right? Like we're all killing stuff, whether you're aware of it or not, doing it directly, indirectly. So we have to start there, and I always want to preface this, like we've got a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. We do not eat perfectly all the time, like not even close. So perfection is impossible, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I love that saying. So
Yeah.
so anyways, and so it's like, all right, we're all killing stuff, and what does that look like? And what does that look like in a soybean field, or in a lettuce field, or on a hog operation? And here, what it looks like I'll have a school group come out, and I'll be like, So we'll talk about the ranch, and I'll say, I'm about to drive out and shoot a bison in the head with a rifle. And I know that sounds like super intense, but I'll make the case to you that what we're about to do is more ethical, humane, and environmentally friendly than the average spinach you find at your grocery store.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh my God, this guy's nuts. Like, run. He's going to shoot us. Yeah. But and then we talk about it. And it's like, we talk about the biodiversity here, right? And when it's time to go shoot the bison, that, we run it as one herd. So, bison are social animals, and they've got like, family groups within the herd. And that bison is standing there like last Friday with literally its friends and family with grass in its mouth. And then it's a copper bullet headshot outer space.
Mhm.
It's just as ethical and humane as it gets.
Extremely quick.
Yeah. I mean, it's just instant. Like,
Yep.
And so, it's something that like Poldy was saying, we've gotten so removed from our food and our food system, but I use the word beautiful a lot in talking about it, because I just think the whole system is just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like these animals for us, like they're conceived on the ranch, they're born on the ranch, they live their whole life on the ranch. And then I go out, they know me,
Mm-hmm.
they know the idiot with the beard, they know the white truck, and then they're standing there and it's just outer space. It's a headshot with a rifle. And then, their guts feed the scavengers in the soil. And then they provide around 400 pounds of the healthiest, most nutrient dense, food that, and bioavailable nutrients that we can absorb, our bodies can absorb.
Yeah, that's a big point.
Yeah.
Huge stuff. Right. It's going into your body, not the toilet.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I imagine, is going to local people.
Yeah. I'd say about 60% of our customers are in Montana, and the other 40% all over the country. And then, we work with a local butcher shop, and we are a big customer for them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money that moves through there from North Bridger Bison. We always we buy hay from our neighbors. We want to support our neighbors.
Yep.
We are very passionate about, rural economies and rural Montana and these small towns and small schools. And so, yeah, it's all connected. And, I just ultimately, that's why I just go back to, it's a beautiful process.
It's the way it should be, is connected.
Right.
Everything should be connected. When you get these big mass producers, they don't know who their customers are or who their butchers are. They just, one and done.
The other extreme is, more than 80% of the beef in this country is controlled by 4 international giant companies.
Yeah.
And I've never been to one of I've seen pictures and like drone shots, but they're, the feedlot slaughterhouse system that's massive, like kind of hard to wrap your mind around how big those places are. And they've got horrible labor issues and they're just not happy, fulfilling places. And that's over 80% of the beef in this country.
Yep.
And there's huge issues around, free market issues and anti-competitive practices, antitrust, monopolies, with these big 4, and the prices that they pay to ranchers in Montana, and then the prices that they charge at the grocery store. It's just a broken
divide,
system.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a big, I think divide's the right word, but yeah, I wanted to actually ask you about that. Like hurdle wise, selling direct to consumer, not a lot of ranchers are doing it. A lot of them seem like they're kind of still forced into that system you just described. So like you kind of escaped that. What are the hurdles there,
It's hard. And I think it's important to recognize it's not for everyone. I get that. Cause like, we have there's like the ranching side of it. And then we have a whole other direct to consumer meat business that takes tons of time. There's marketing, sales, customer service, answering questions, order fulfillment, managing orders, managing the right now we've got, I don't even know off the top of my head, 2 or 3 bison at Amsterdam Meat Shop, and customers waiting for it, and
Yep.
part local, some around the country. We shipped yesterday. There's deliveries. I mean, there's a lot that you're managing, and not everyone wants to do that. You
Yeah.
know, it's
So instead of just raising the animals, you're also having to do the whole business side of it.
100%.
Reach out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's,
Like there was someone here yesterday, and they were like, you guys, seem to like, you have a good Instagram account. Like you take it seriously and post interesting stuff. Like, why? Like you're a ranch. And I was like, well, we're a ranch.
Mm-hmm.
We're also an e-commerce direct to consumer meat business.
yeah.
Yep.
And so we have to do that stuff.
Yeah.
People
Like-
need to know.
Yeah. The meat doesn't sell itself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like we're out there hustling,
Right.
and getting the word out. And it's
Yep.
not easy,
No.
Are there legal hurdles as well that a lot of people face?
Or regulations.
So I remember, I
Yeah.
think it was like during like 2-3 years ago that some of the senators had voted for something around, maybe it was Idaho or somewhere, to make it a lot easier to sell direct to consumer.
Yeah. There are, I mean, one, I just want to go back to that, like, again, we've talked about multiple times here about how great ranching is for Montana and local, rural communities and wildlife and all of that stuff. And also, selling direct to consumer, it also depends on where you're located.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're lucky that we're 30 miles from Bozeman,
Right.
Mhm.
so, and then we've got great butchers around here. Cause if, I've been just very, understanding, that this is not for everyone. And even for some people that would want to do it, they might just be geographically in a spot where it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then it just frustrates me, like that people that do a cow-calf operation and are amazing ranchers and provide all these benefits for the people of Montana. And they get, my understanding is that cattle prices are high right now, but still, these big companies the big four they don't pay great. I wish our neighbors made a lot more money.
Yeah.
Just to cut to the
Mhm.
chase.
What they do
Yes, for what they do,
for the
the
landscape.
services they provide, the food they provide, all of that stuff. I wish they made a lot more money. They
And
should
Yeah.
make a lot more
I'd
money.
assume a lot of ranchers would likely want to do more regenerative stuff, put that extra work in that you described earlier, but the reward isn't there, obviously.
Yep.
But beyond like the philosophical reward, knowing that you're doing something good, but like, everyone's got to have their lunch, right? So,
Yeah.
No, everyone's got, yeah. So, but to your question about the red tape, it depends. Like, so yes, the big meat companies, I think, like to go back 100 years ago, there used to be a whole bunch of different like mom and pop butcher shops and processing facilities. And then those slowly shuttered as the big meat monopolies, or that doesn't make sense, but the big meat oligarchy, if you will, came together, and we had centralized processing, and put all these small places out of business. And then during COVID, all of a sudden you had meat processing on the cover of the New York Times and the lead story on CNN, which was crazy, right?
Yeah.
But we had empty shelves, and people were like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
It showed how unresilient our food system is, how fragile it is, that this big, efficient in air quotes, system, it's not great.
Mhm.
And so since then there's been, pushes in Congress that, to my knowledge, they've all failed. But to remove some of the red tape to make it easier. But the short answer is there's 3 tiers of meat classification. There's federally inspected meat, state inspected meat, and then what's called custom exempt. And we operate under the custom exempt. So we're selling we're selling quarter, half, or whole shares of a live animal.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we pre-sell each animal, and then we take it to the butcher. And then when the customer gets the meat, it's all stamped not for sale. So they can't try to sell it to like a restaurant or
Got
something.
it.
Mhm.
And so it's great that there's that classification out there. So if you ever hear about someone, it's like, oh yeah, I bought a beef, or my 2 neighbors bought a beef from someone in the Madison Valley.
Yeah.
It's probably custom exempt. And then state inspected meat, it might be different now in Montana. And I don't want to get too in the weeds, but bison have some different rules than beef. But for a long time, if a beef cattle were slaughtered under state inspection, you couldn't sell across state lines.
Mm.
And so that means in a huge state like Montana, if you killed a beef at a state inspected facility in eastern Montana, they could sell 10 hours west to Montana, but they couldn't sell 15 minutes east to South Dakota, which is crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah.
Now I think that I don't know because we don't raise cattle, but there's like an interstate shipping cooperative or something, or there's some law that allows that, because the irony is our state inspection program is every bit robust as the USDA inspection program. And then USDA inspected meat can go anywhere, but there's only so many USDA inspected facilities. There's only so many USDA inspectors.
Lots of bottlenecks.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of red tape, and it seems like big food, these big meat companies, they say jump and the USDA says how high, and the rules are written in a way to squeeze out the little guys, because at the end of the day, if it's really about food safety, like, shouldn't there be an inspector in every restaurant kitchen in America?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you go in, you order a burger. Like, how do you know it's not road-killed skunk injected with?
It could be.
I'm serious.
Some red dye.
I mean,
yeah.
And if it's about, but like the hoops you have to jump through in the meat industry, are really, I think, excessive.
Yeah.
I just think there should be some. I think that they could scale it back significantly to make it much easier for ranchers to sell direct to consumer, or to sell to restaurants or whoever, or just to distributors. Just basically have a system where ranchers can get paid more for their work and the food they provide. And then just all the benefits we talked about earlier would just increase from that. So
yeah, they've definitely made a monoculture, so to speak, with industrial ag, and I think the small guys are what's going to bring in the resilient
100%
future into the food system.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, everything I know from reading, and people that know a hell of a lot more about than I do, but it's that, a resilient food system is going to be a more decentralized food system.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier too. And like, I think bison, them being on the land, already being adapted to it much more than domesticated animals, maybe, it seems like they could play a really important role there. And then also resilient in terms of building that rural food economy again, making sure there's food on the shelves in case we have, a big event like we did 3-4 years ago. So yeah. And then also the nutrition that comes along with the bison meat, and especially if they're raised how you're raising them on biodiverse pastures. Overall, more resilient land, more resilient people, more resilient system altogether, I would say.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Sad to hear that there are all these hurdles, but I'm also happy to hear that there's people like you who are figuring it out, or others, I'm sure, who are, others out there who I'm sure, trying to change it, trying to improve that.
No, it's definitely getting better. I mean, COVID was like an earthquake to the system. And so the federal government has, issued hundreds of millions of dollars in grant money to improve meat processing capacity in the country. And like in Montana, there's been like well over $10 million gone out to meat processors to, improve capacity, or just just make their facilities more efficient and more, just so it's definitely like COVID really put a spotlight on it. So it's getting better, but it still has a long way to go. Yeah.
In general, I think it put a spotlight on it for like food in general for a lot of people, which I think that was maybe one silver lining, people started to think about their food and where it comes from a lot more during that time, and hopefully still are going forward. So one cool thing though, that, if someone's buying meat from you, they know it's local, but do they also know that everything they get is coming from that one animal? Is that the case?
Oh yeah. 100%. So, if you ordered a half bison from us tonight, I would, field harvest it in a few weeks. And part of it, kind of going back to what we were talking about, food and meat, and we're all killing stuff and the system. We're also, part of our mission is connecting people to where their food comes from and demystifying this whole process. Because again, we just think the whole thing's beautiful here. And so I'd field harvest your bison in a few weeks. And then the next day I'd send you some photos. So I'd drive out, I'd take a couple photos of the herd and the landscape. And then after I kill the bison, take a picture of a dead bison on the ground. Never anything bloody or gory, but just very obvious. Like that's a dead bison laying on the ground. And then once it's skinned and cut down the backbone and on the rail, take a picture of it with one side shoulder side out and one side rib side out, and then send those to the customers the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
To say, hey, I field harvested your bison yesterday, and say, hey, it was, a freezing cold morning, or it was a beautiful day and it's now dry aging, and they know, like that's the animal they're going to eat.
That's as close to getting your meat from hunting as you can get, I think.
Yeah.
So that's really special.
Yeah. And then like on a half bison, I'd put you in touch with the butcher, and I'd get out of that conversation, and you would talk to the butcher about how you want your half custom cut, packaged, do anything you want. And then we would then deliver it. And when we deliver it, we include a little sprig of sagebrush from the ranch with some bison hair tied around it. So just another we have this, we coined this little phrase here, eat with your eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Just kind of, it's just, that whole thing of like, we're all killing shit just because something is labeled, plant-based, cruelty-free, vegan at the grocery store doesn't mean it's, good for the environment.
Yeah.
Like there's just, it's nuanced. And
so there's tons of transparency to what you're doing, which I think is super helpful, like powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you order a quarter, we offer a quarter is that side of bison all of it gets, so if you each ordered a quarter, that side of bison would be cut up, and then you each would get half of the half, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all of it's all of your meat is from the animal I sent you a picture of.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So think about that though, for people listening, like going back to, the death part is inevitable, right? No matter what diet you have. But if you're buying meat from you or you're hunting, you're likely contributing to the death of one animal. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're going to the grocery store, you're buying your steak all the time, or you're even buying your plant-based food, who knows how many animals have died in that process, over a year, let's say. If you're buying a steak at the grocery store, you're probably getting a steak from a different animal every single time.
Sure.
Yep.
So,
and who knows where they came from?
Getting your meat from a local rancher like you going hunting, that's really, in my eyes, like, how are you going to really reduce that impact if that's something you care about?
Right. Yeah. I just think about it like, whatever you're getting at the grocery store, cereal, it's like you look on the back of the box at all the different ingredients, and where did all those ingredients come from?
Yeah.
And was it good for the environment? Bad for the environment? What are the labor conditions like? I mean, there's just so many questions around that. There's a friend of mine, Kate Kavanaugh, is doing a deep dive into like these things of like, where does our stuff come from? Because food, we were texting recently and we were talking about the way like, it's like food, and particularly cows, people have just become obsessed with, like in like a negative way, but like everything else gets a free pass.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like our jeans,
you
know, and shoes and cars and hats and headlights.
Like that doesn't produce any carbon.
Earbuds.
Like the process of that.
And doesn't kill and doesn't destroy wildlife habitat.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I remember talking to a friend of mine back when we were doing environmental policy work, and we were talking about this one night, and I was like, man, if you really wanted to have no impact on the planet, like you'd be living naked in a cave.
Yeah.
And he said, he's like, no,
you'd still have an impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He'd be like, and he was like, you'd be jumping off a bridge. I mean, not to be too dark, but I apologize. I hate when people say that. My younger brother and I joke about this when it's like, not to be rude, but that dinner sucked.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't know. It's like a free pass. We say not to. So
not to be rude.
I know. So I really try to like not say that. Anyway, so I apologize for going to be direct. I apologize for going a little dark there, but
okay.
it's a good point. You know, it's a thought exercise that like even naked in a cave, you still have to eat, drink, pee, and poop.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
You still have impact no matter what you do.
100%.
It's just minimizing or maybe making it a little bit better.
A little. I think that's so well said.
Yeah.
I was about to say the same thing. Just a little bit better. Just a little more thoughtful, because none of us are going to be perfect. You know, like I can't tell you exactly where my jeans came from. You know, like or my socks. Like you know, we're all trying our best in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A little bit better.
That is awesome. Sweet. I guess you got I got one more. You got one more?
Yeah, I do. Well, it's kind of a two-parter. At what age do you field harvest the bison, and how are you identifying which bison are going to be harvested versus not?
Most of the majority of the animals that I harvest are between 2 and 3.
Okay.
And then they have ear tags. So we work them once a year, and the calves get ear tags, and they each have their own number, but every number on there is really irrelevant except for the last number, and that's the year they were born.
Okay.
So that's how you know. But then do it long enough, and you can just kind of tell who they are. And then we do field harvest some older. When we work them once a year, the vet we work with checks them or pregnancy checks them, and any non-bred, open animals immediately become a meat animal.
Mm-hmm.
And so those can be anywhere from 3 to 14.
Okay.
And the older ones we turn into, like the super old ones, all ground bison.
Okay.
And those are the ones that you see, like the fat is like orange.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. I want to see that so bad. I've only seen pictures.
Yeah.
Are you going through and castrating each male, or you don't have to?
Nope. They're just intact bulls.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, and you have the females out there then too, right? They're just, you don't usually harvest those, mostly bulls, or?
No. So early on we didn't, because we were trying to grow the herd. At this point, we're no longer trying to grow the herd. Like I said, we've hit the sweet spot. We've early on, like the first couple of years, we would buy additional meat animals from those 2 ranches, or the one ranch that I mentioned along the Rocky Mountain front. And a lot of those that came back were their open non-bred cows. So we were killing females from them that were meat animals. And now that our herd has reached, equilibrium, as we say, and we're not trying to grow the herd, we're not buying meat animals. We do field harvest most of the 2-year-old females, because we keep some that go into the breeding herd, because we know there'll be some open cows. But if all the 2-year-old females went into the breeding herd would just get too big, and you have to take care of, you got to manage your numbers.
Yeah.
Do you have any problems with inbreeding? Do you get a bull in from somewhere else during the breeding season, or?
That's a great question. Because our animals arrived in January 2019, all the cows came from one ranch, and then our bulls came from a different ranch. And so we brought 2 outside, we had 2 outside bulls, and then we brought in a 3rd outside bull. And we will be bringing in another outside bull sometime soon.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Nice.
Awesome. Well, I guess my last question would be, we have a lot of foodies on listening to the podcast, obviously, and hopefully a lot of them would be interested in getting some meat from your ranch, maybe some of the Bozeman listeners or Montana listeners, but you do ship nationwide, which is awesome. But what are some ways to cook that bison meat that you can recommend,
So I joke, we eat so much bison that I joke that I think my kids are going to grow horns.
Yeah. They might.
It's just we're just constantly eating it. And people ask, like, do you ever get sick of it? And I'm not bullshitting you at all. Like, I enjoy our bison meat today more than I did 5 years ago.
Really?
I've never loved it more.
That's awesome.
It's so delicious and healthy and makes you feel so good.
Yeah.
And
It's a slow burn.
yeah.
Eat bison meat for 4 years. It's
I just love it. And we mostly eat ground bison. That's, obviously like that's mostly what we have. And
I love ground meat.
it's great. And we
It's
do
the
it.
best.
And honestly, we eat so much of it that we do, like just the other night, we'll just brown like 3 pounds of ground bison in the pan. And then we call it choose your own adventure. And so you can turn it into tacos. You can put soy sauce, ketchup, barbecue sauce.
That's
love
like
that.
my and Poldy's diet.
That's all we do.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Add some real food ingredients to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we
Mix
do
it
that.
up.
And one thing that's different with bison, because I'm avid hunter and I butcher my own elk and deer, is that with elk and deer you trim out all the fat. Bison fat is absolutely delicious.
Really?
Like crazy delicious.
Really?
And so what I've been doing now is on a friend's suggestion years ago is this time of year when we have an animal that has like extra back fat, they'll vac seal it for me. And then I cut our bison fat into my deer and elk.
Oh, that's a great way to
And it's
do
this
it.
like beautiful yellow fat. And we don't eat that many steaks because one, our meat goes to our customers, but we always pull a quarter, for ourselves. We always make sure we've got plenty of meat here. But like I said, it's mostly ground bison. And we'd been eating just ground bison after ground bison and lots of it. And then this June, I found a package of a couple of ribeyes and we just cooked them over fire in our fire pit. And man, I mean, medium rare, like they're really good.
Yeah.
And the fat is crazy. Like it's so like obviously bison, it's like elk. It's very lean.
Yeah.
So you don't get the intramuscular marbling.
Right.
Like
you
you
get
see,
that cap.
but you get the cap.
Yeah.
And they cut it with the cap on and it's crazy. It's so good.
I bet
So
that's good.
yeah. So for a foodie, I would say, so for our steaks, which it would be porterhouse, T-bone, ribeye, sirloin, flat iron, filet mignon. I almost always, it's just, salt and pepper, cast iron skillet, cooking between rare to medium rare. The great thing, our kids love, like they love rare to medium rare.
Yeah.
They're not weirded out at all.
That's good.
That's just how they grew up.
Yeah.
So they're, I could eat that. Those steaks are so good. And then the roasts, you can cube them and use them for stew meat. We do a lot of choose your own adventure with that. We'll put it in the slow cooker, because again, we're working, we've got 2 young kids, like not every night. I mean, it's rare to have a gourmet meal. So we'll take a roast, throw it in the slow cooker, cover it in water. I mean, I'm talking like bare bones, the laziest way to cook. We don't use stock. It's like water, some spices, a little bit of olive oil, and just walk away.
Yeah.
And then that night, take it out, shred it.
Yep.
Choose your own adventure.
This is
That's
exactly what we
literally
do.
Yeah.
We've been doing that with elk all year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do about 6
Elk and
pounds
deer.
in the crock pot, maybe an Instant Pot at the same time, and eat it all week.
Yeah.
Easy crock pot meat.
Yep.
The best.
And then the kids, like, you want a pulled pork, you want shredded tacos, like what are you in the mood for? And it's just so easy and just so good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
And
not the
then-
only ones.
Yeah. No, we that makes me feel good because I keep Sarah and I are like, God, we're really getting bad here.
Yeah, we're
There's
like, we're so weird. Like,
yeah, we're like, this is just
Hey, it's efficient and nutritious. Like,
exactly. It's just like, it's like so good for our kids and for us. So we just eat a shit ton of it. And the ground, you can do it. I mean, it has this, it's got fat in it. So, beautiful bison fat. So whether, tacos, pasta sauce, burgers, meatballs, sloppy joes, if there's anything you can do with ground bison, we do it.
Yeah. Sounds so good. Are you just selling the fat by itself, or is that rare?
We don't know.
You don't get
so
enough.
the way we do it, the custom exempt, we can't sell individual pieces.
Right. Okay.
So same thing, like the organ meats, we just give those away to friends and customers.
Yeah.
And then the fat, we don't get that. I get enough for myself, and then And then there's someone now who we're working with on tallow. But they mostly want I think it's called the leaf fat around the kidneys.
Leaf fat, right? Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can, I'll try to get you some.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
That was mixed with some elk, like you said, or deer. That would be insane.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: have you ever tried it raw?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So I've taken, a fillet, we call it bison sashimi, and just to take it out of the fridge, pat it dry, slice it thin, and drizzle it with olive oil, salt, pepper. And I've done it with people, and they turn into like wild animals.
Yeah.
I'm serious. They're like fighting each other with forks.
I'm imagining like dressed up in nice suits and stuff.
No,
and just
no.
going after it.
No, just here in our kitchen. Just put like sliced thin, and it's just bison meat. It's got almost often like a deep purple color to it, and so when you slice it thin and lay it across a cutting board, it looks like tuna sashimi.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's so good.
I tried that with Axis backstrap deer
okay.
once from Daniel Pruitt, and it was literally, like you said, like sushi, like sashimi.
Yeah, you just it's just incredible.
Yeah. So, obviously, if anyone wants to do this, do it at your own risk. But like, that's something I would only do with like an animal from you or like a wild game I hunted.
Totally.
And actually, the first time I tried something from North Bridger Bison, was a raw bison heart that our buddy Tyler, God, why am I blanking on Tyler's last name right now?
Chef Tyler.
Chef Tyler. God, McManus.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He came over to do a podcast with us last year, and he brought a whole heart from you.
Oh, awesome.
So I was like, I have to try it raw. Tried it raw, was super good, the heart, and then we made like a stroganoff with the heart.
It was so
It was really good. Yeah.
It's funny. Our kids love heart.
Mhm.
Like I was telling you, our dog Ed had this injury, and so so trying to both help his recovery and boost his spirits, I was cooking some heart for Ed, and our kids came in there like, "Are you cooking heart?" And they just grabbed forks and just
something you never hear normal.
I know.
Say.
They're like, "Is that bison heart?" And they immediately grabbed forks, and I was like, "Hey, that's enough. That's for Ed."
I love that.
No, but Dad,
Yeah.
come on.
That's great.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, this has been an absolute pleasure. I think we've been going for an hour 30. I think that's a great time to end it. Is there anything else? Obviously plug all your stuff, but anything else you want people to know about bison ranching? Obviously, you're very passionate about it. I'm sure you could talk about it for hours. But anything we didn't cover that you think is important to get out there?
No, I think this was a phenomenal, fun conversation. I appreciate all the prep work, phenomenal questions, and thank you guys for being interested and driving all the way up here. It's great to meet you. I love what you guys are doing and all about.
Too.
Can't wait to listen to more episodes and up my foraging game.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, if we're easy to find, northbridgerbison.com is our website. My email and cell phone are on there. There's a lot of information under the quarter, half, and whole bison. But if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out. And then the only social media we do is Instagram, just North Bridger Bison.
You have a newsletter.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Forgot about that. Good point. We have an email newsletter my approach, I write them, is I do our newsletter the way I would want a company to do it. And so we don't have like a weekly, I'm not like, I got to figure out something to send this Friday.
Yeah.
We only send it out when we have something that we think is interesting to share.
Yeah.
So we might send 2 in 10 days and maybe not another one for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And we always try to make them a little humor, some good photos, just something interesting. But we also we definitely include things in the email newsletter that we don't in Instagram. So yeah, sign up for our email newsletter.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Matt. That was great.
Yeah,
This is so
thank
great.
you.
Bye-bye.